the inheritance betrayal. She was erased from the will, then everything changed. The ancient grandfather clock in the hallway struck 3 in the afternoon as Hannah Matthews stood frozen before the open safe in her parents' study. Outside, the weathered Victorian home in Salem rain beat against century-old window panes in an endless rhythm that matched her racing heartbeat. The yellowed paper trembled in her hands. Her name was nowhere to be found. After 27 years of her life, dedicated to this house, after sacrificing her career, her relationships, her dreams, after 7 years of caring for her ailing parents alone, while her siblings built lives in distant cities, none of it mattered now. The last will and testament of Eleanor and Richard Matthews made their intentions crystal clear. The family home, worth $1.6 million, along with all assets, would be divided equally between her brother James and her sister Rebecca. Hannah Matthews, 34 years old caretaker and devoted daughter, had been completely erased. She sank into the leather chair that still held the impression of her father's body, the chair where he had promised her just 3 months before his death that she would always have a home here. The family estate had been her entire world since she moved back at 27 to help when her mother's Parkinson's had worsened. Her father's heart condition following a year later had sealed her fate. While James built his surgical practice in Chicago and Rebecca expanded her law firm in Seattle, Hannah had changed bedpans, administered medications, scheduled appointments, and kept the historic home from crumbling around them. The letter from Wellington and Associates Attorneys at Law had arrived that morning. Cold, formal, precise. The property would be sold at auction in 7 days unless she vacated immediately. Her siblings had already approved the sale. They had known all along. Hannah's gaze drifted to the worn leather notebook on the desk. Her financial Bible. Inside were 7 years of meticulous records, every mortgage payment made from her personal account when her parents' medical bills had overwhelmed their savings. Every contractor receipt for repairs to the roof, the plumbing, the electrical system, every tax payment, insurance premium, utility bill, all with her signature. All with confirmation numbers carefully recorded in her precise handwriting. She had put her entire inheritance from her grandmother into this house, $178,000 that could have been her escape, her fresh start, her chance at something beyond these walls. Instead, it had gone into maintaining the family legacy. A legacy she had just discovered was never meant to include her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "When can we expect the house to be empty? The auction company needs dates." Hannah's fingers hovered over a response that would never fully capture the depth of her betrayal. Then her eyes caught the framed family photo on the wall. The last Christmas before everything changed. Her father's proud smile, her mother's gentle eyes, and between them, Hannah beaming with the certainty that she was exactly where she belonged. Next to that photo hung another from 30 years earlier. Her grandparents, standing on the porch of this very house, the legacy extending backward through generations. She set down her phone without responding and picked up her notebook instead. The evidence of her sacrifice was all here documented in black and white. Proof that this house was as much hers as anyone's. Maybe more so. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows like urgent fingers demanding attention. 7 days. She had 7 days to find a way to stop her past from being erased and her future from being auctioned to the highest bidder. Hannah closed the notebook and tucked it into her bag. For the first time in 7 years, she walked out the front door without checking if her parents needed anything first, the weight of invisible chains falling away with each step. If her family thought they could simply erase her, they had severely underestimated what she was capable of. She had 7 days to reclaim her dignity, and she knew exactly where to start. Long before sunrise, Hannah sat cross-legged on her childhood bedroom floor, surrounded by stacks of papers illuminated by a single desk lamp. Sleep had been impossible. The rain had finally stopped, leaving behind a heavy silence that allowed her thoughts to echo too loudly. Outside her window, the silhouette of the ancient oak tree stretched shadowy branches against the gradually lightening sky. The same tree she had climbed as a child, feeling invincible. The same tree her father had built a swing on when she was 8. The same tree she had contemplated cutting down 3 years ago when a storm damaged one massive limb, threatening the roof below. Instead, she had spent $4,300 hiring an arborist to save it. Another entry in her notebook. Another investment in a home that was apparently never meant to be hers. Hannah rubbed her eyes and returned to the task at hand. The evidence was overwhelming. 7 years of financial records meticulously categorized and labeled: mortgage payments, property taxes, insurance premiums, utility bills, renovation costs, medical expenses, all paid from her accounts, all documented with confirmation numbers, all adding up to a staggering $347,000. Money she would never see again if the house was sold. Her grandmother Catherine had always told her, "Keep records of everything, Hannah. Your memory might fail, but paper remembers forever." The irony wasn't lost on her. Her parents had taught her that same lesson about responsibility and meticulous care. Values she had embodied while they apparently planned to cut her out entirely. Hannah's phone buzzed with another message from Rebecca. "James and I need to know when you'll be out. The auction company is getting impatient." Beside it appeared a message from James. "Becca says you're being difficult. Just pack your stuff and go, sis. You've got a week. It's not like you have much anyway." The casual cruelty stole her breath. Not like you have much anyway. As if her entire life hadn't been poured into these walls. As if the sacrifices of her youth hadn't been payment enough. Hannah set the phone aside and pulled out her laptop. The idea had come to her in the darkness as she stared at the ceiling, counting all the opportunities she had declined over the years. The boyfriend who wanted to move to California, the job offer in New York, the chance to finish her master's degree, all abandoned for family obligation, all sacrificed for a home that was being taken from her. She opened her rarely used social media account and began to type. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as 7 years of silent sacrifice found a voice. She detailed every payment, every renovation, every medical bill. She described the career she had abandoned, the relationship that had withered the dreams she had deferred. Most importantly, she calculated to the penny what she had contributed to a home she was now being forced to leave. "Hannah, I have been erased from my family's will after sacrificing everything to care for my parents and their historic home for 7 years. In 7 days, this house will be auctioned unless I can prove what I've contributed. Here is every receipt, every payment, every confirmation number. Judge for yourself if this is justice." She attached photos of her meticulous records bank statements and the cold legal letter demanding she vacate. Then, after a moment's hesitation, she added a photo of herself standing on the porch beside her now-deceased parents. Their proud smiles a stark contrast to the betrayal their final wishes had revealed. The sun was fully risen now, streaming through her window and illuminating the dust motes that danced in the still air. Hannah took a deep breath and pressed share. The post would probably disappear into the void like everything else she had ever done. Unseen, unappreciated, forgotten. She closed her laptop and began the familiar routine of making breakfast for one in a house built for a family. The emptiness of the kitchen echoed with memories of Sunday pancakes and holiday gatherings. Of her mother teaching her to bake pies, with apples from the orchard out back. Of her father insisting on making his special hot chocolate on winter mornings. Hannah was midway through her coffee when her phone began to buzz, then buzz again, and again, and again. She picked it up with shaking hands and stared in disbelief at the notification counter spinning higher by the second. 100 comments. 200 shares. 500. 1,000. She opened the app and watched as her story spread like wildfire across the internet. Comments poured in faster than she could read them. "This is outrageous. What kind of family does this? I'm a lawyer in Massachusetts. Contact me immediately." "You have rights. I went through something similar. Don't give up." Hannah's phone rang. Rebecca's name flashed on the screen. Then, immediately after it stopped, James called. Then cousins. Then old friends from high school she hadn't spoken to in years. For the first time in 7 years, Hannah silenced her phone and set it aside. She had spent enough time responding to others' demands. Now the world was responding to hers. She had 6 more days to save her home, and for the first time since opening that safe, she felt something that had been missing for years. Hope. By noon, Hannah's post had been shared 17,000 times. By evening, it had reached 120,000. Local news stations began calling, requesting interviews. A crowdfunding page someone had created in her name had already reached $12,000, though Hannah had nothing to do with it, and immediately contacted the creator to have it taken down. This wasn't about money. This was about justice. On day 2, Logan Porter knocked on her door. Hannah remembered him vaguely from high school. A quiet boy who had lived down the street and occasionally mowed their lawn during summers. Now he stood on her porch in a crisp suit with a business card that read, "Porter Legal Services." "Logan, I specialize in estate disputes. I saw your post, and I think you have a case. Have you heard of constructive trust or unjust enrichment?" Hannah invited him into the kitchen, where legal terms swirled between them over cups of tea. Quantum meruit, promissory estoppel, equitable lien, words that offered pathways through the wilderness of her situation. "Logan, your detailed records are extraordinary, Hannah. Most people in your situation wouldn't have documented everything so meticulously. Those confirmation numbers and receipts could be the difference between losing everything and receiving what you're owed." His eyes lingered on her notebook with a respect bordering on reverence. The same notebook James had once mocked her for keeping. The same notebook her mother had given her for Christmas a decade ago with a simple inscription, "For Hannah, who remembers everything." Logan explained that her case had several potential avenues. The oral promise from her father that she would always have a home, the implied contract of her financial contributions, the unjust enrichment her siblings would receive from her years of investment. "Logan, I'd like to represent you pro bono. Your story deserves justice, and frankly, I've wanted to go up against Wellington and Associates for years. They have a reputation for aggressive tactics in estate matters." Hannah hesitated. She had been handling everything alone for so long that accepting help felt like admitting weakness. But the reality of her situation was undeniable. 6 days remained before the auction. She needed a legal expert. She nodded slowly. "I can't pay you." Logan smiled. "Sometimes cases are about more than payment. Sometimes they're about setting precedents. Your case could help others in similar situations. Besides, we went to high school together. I remember how you tutored me through Mr. Wilson's impossible chemistry class. Consider this repayment with interest." As Logan left with copies of her documentation, Hannah's phone rang again. This time the caller ID displayed WCVB Channel 5 News. The reporter on the other end spoke quickly, excitedly. "Reporter, Ms. Matthews, your story has gone viral nationally. We'd like to do a feature segment. Would you be willing to appear on camera with your documentation?" Hannah declined politely. The public exposure already felt overwhelming. She had only wanted to document her story, not become a public figure. But the reporter continued undeterred. "Reporter, we've reached out to your siblings for comment. Your brother claimed that your parents changed their will after you allegedly mishandled some of their finances. Would you care to respond to that accusation?" The words hit like a physical blow. Mishandled finances? The careful steward who had stretched every penny to maintain the house and provide for her parents' care was being accused of financial misconduct? Hannah's hand tightened around her phone. That is categorically false, and I have every record to prove it. In fact, I used my own inheritance to support this house when their medical bills depleted their savings. Reporter, would you be willing to share those records? Hannah ended the call, her mind reeling. James was not just erasing her from the inheritance, he was now attempting to erase her dignity, her reputation, her very character. As twilight settled, over Salem, Hannah sat on the porch swing, watching lightning bugs rise from the grass. The same porch where generations of her family had gathered on summer evenings. The same swing where her father had sat with his arm around her, telling stories of his own childhood in this house. She opened her laptop and began typing again. This time, she shared the specific bank records showing transfers from her personal accounts to cover the mortgage when her parents' medical expenses had mounted. She included the loan documents showing how she had refinanced the house in her own name when the original mortgage had been in danger of foreclosure. She attached the property tax receipts with her name clearly listed as the payer. Hannah, my brother has claimed I mishandled my parents' finances. Here are the records proving otherwise. I refinanced their mortgage in my name when medical bills threatened foreclosure. Every payment came from my accounts for the past 4 years. I welcome any forensic accounting examination of these records. She shared the post, then turned off her notifications. The fireflies continued their silent illumination of the gathering darkness. The truth was now fully visible for anyone who cared to see it. Whether that would be enough remained uncertain. Inside the house, the grandfather clock chimed 9 times. 5 days remained. On the morning of day 3, Hannah woke to the sound of car doors slamming outside. She pushed aside her curtains to see a sleek black Mercedes in the driveway. Rebecca had arrived. Hannah descended the stairs slowly each step a deliberate choice to remain calm. She found her sister standing in the kitchen running manicured fingers over the worn countertop with a look of distaste. Rebecca, you've really stirred up trouble, haven't you? My firm's partners are asking questions. James says his hospital administration called him. Did you really have to air family business to the entire internet? Hannah leaned against the doorframe, studying the stranger her sister had become. The matching designer handbag and shoes, the carefully highlighted hair, the defensive posture of someone unexpectedly called to account. Hannah, did you really have to erase me from the will after I gave up my life to care for our parents? Rebecca's expression hardened. That was your choice, Hannah. Nobody forced you to stay. Hannah, and nobody told me that staying would cost me my inheritance. Why didn't you tell me they changed the will? Rebecca looked away. It wasn't my responsibility to tell you. Besides, you always acted so superior about being the one who stayed. The dutiful daughter, the perfect caretaker. Maybe Mom and Dad saw through that? The accusation landed like a slap. Hannah had never viewed her caregiving as superior, merely necessary. Someone had needed to be there. Someone had needed to help their mother up the stairs when Parkinson's made walking difficult. Someone had needed to monitor their father's heart medication and drive him to countless doctor appointments. Hannah, I stayed because they needed help, and neither you nor James offered to share the responsibility. Rebecca, we have careers, Hannah, lives we've built. You chose to put yours on hold. That's not our fault. Hannah, and now you're choosing to take the home I've maintained with my own money for 7 years. How is that fair? Rebecca's phone chimed with a message. She glanced at it and frowned. James is being deposed by your lawyer tomorrow. This is absurd. We're following Mom and Dad's wishes. The will is legally binding. Hannah reached for her notebook and slid it across the counter. Actually, there's a legal concept called constructive trust. When someone contributes substantially to a property based on promises or reasonable expectations, they gain an equitable interest regardless of the written will. Rebecca stared at the notebook, then back at Hannah with new uncertainty. When did you become a legal expert? Hannah, when I realized I needed to become my own advocate. No one else was going to do it. Before Rebecca could respond, the doorbell rang. Hannah opened it to find a middle-aged woman with a tablet and a compassionate smile. Woman, Ms. Matthews, I'm Diane Rodriguez from Elder Services of Merrimack Valley. We've received some concerning reports about your parents' care and financial arrangements. I'd like to ask you some questions if that's all right. Hannah stepped aside to let her in. Of course. I have all the documentation you might need. Rebecca moved quickly to intervene. I'm Rebecca Matthews Goldstein. I'm an attorney and Hannah's sister. What exactly is the nature of this investigation? Diane consulted her tablet. We've received reports suggesting financial exploitation of the elder. Matthews, given your sister's viral posts, we're required to investigate such claims as a matter of protocol. Rebecca's face flushed with anger. That's outrageous. If anyone should be investigated, it's Hannah. She lived here rent-free for years. Hannah calmly retrieved her notebook and opened it to the first page. Actually, I have records of every household. Expense I've paid since moving back home, including the $22,000 for Mom's specialized wheelchair and accessibility renovations that insurance wouldn't cover, and the $37,000 for Dad's heart surgery co-pays, and the $85,000 to replace the roof and heating system, all paid from my accounts. Diane looked between the sisters. Perhaps we should all sit down. This appears more complicated than our initial report suggested. For the next 2 hours, Hannah provided Diane with methodical documentation of her parents' care financial records and home maintenance. Rebecca sat in increasingly uncomfortable silence as the evidence mounted. When Diane finally stood to leave, her expression had shifted from professional concern to troubled comprehension. Diane, Ms. Matthews, your records are impeccable. I'll need copies of these documents, but I can already tell you this case will likely be reclassified. If anything, the evidence suggests you've been the victim of exploitation, not the perpetrator. After Diane left, Rebecca remained at the kitchen table, staring at the stack of evidence Hannah had provided. Rebecca, why didn't you tell us you were paying for all this? Hannah, I did. For years. On every family call, every holiday visit. You and James always changed the subject. Eventually, I stopped mentioning it. Rebecca's phone rang. James's name appeared on the screen. She answered, putting it on speaker. James, have you handled the Hannah situation yet? The auction company called again. They need us to confirm she'll be out by Monday. Rebecca glanced at Hannah, then at the notebooks spread across the table. I think we need to reconsider James. There's a lot we didn't know. James's voice hardened. Don't let her manipulate you, Becca. Mom and Dad made their wishes clear. The house gets sold, we split the proceeds end. Of story. Hannah leaned toward the phone. The house that I've been paying the mortgage on for 4 years, James. The house that would have been foreclosed on if I hadn't refinanced it in my name. A stunned silence followed. James. That's not possible, Mom. And Dad owned the house outright. Hannah, they took out a reverse mortgage to pay for Mom's treatments 5 years ago. When that wasn't enough, they took a second mortgage. When they couldn't make payments, I refinanced it to save the house. Check the county records if you don't believe me. The line went silent for so long, they wondered if he had hung up. James, I'll call you back, Becca. The call ended. Rebecca stared at Hannah with new eyes. Rebecca, is that really true? About the mortgage? Hannah nodded, pushing the loan documents across the table. See for yourself. The house has been in my name for almost 4 years. Mom and Dad signed ownership over when they couldn't make the payments anymore. We agreed they would add me to the will to formalize it, but apparently that never happened. Rebecca's legal training took over as she examined the documents. Her face paled. These are legitimate, but if you legally own the house, then the will... Hannah, doesn't matter. The will can't transfer property they didn't legally own. I've been trying to tell you and James this for days, but neither of you would listen. Rebecca set down the papers, her confident facade crumbling. Why didn't they tell us? Hannah. Pride, maybe. Or they thought you would judge them for the financial problems. Or maybe they thought you both had your own lives and didn't need to be burdened. The same reason I've been handling everything alone for 7 years. Narrative pause. I want to know in the comments which decision you would make. Would you forgive your siblings and share the house, or would you claim what is legally yours after their betrayal? Day 4 dawned with dark clouds gathering over Salem. Hannah woke to 17 missed calls, 8 from James, 5 from Rebecca. The rest from news agencies and distant relatives suddenly interested in family matters. Logan Porter arrived at 9, carrying a leather briefcase and news. Logan. The county recorder's office confirms the property transfer. The house has been in your name since the refinancing 4 years ago. Your parents had no legal right to include it in their will, and the probate court has issued an emergency stay on any transfer or sale pending further review. Hannah felt the first full breath she'd taken in days. So the auction is canceled? Logan nodded. For now, at least. Wellington. And associates are scrambling. They clearly didn't do their due diligence before sending that auction notice. But Hannah, there's more. Elder Services filed their report this morning. They're recommending a full investigation into Wellington for potential elder abuse. Hannah's eyes widened. Elder abuse? Logan. Their preliminary findings suggest the attorneys may have encouraged your parents to make changes to their will without proper consideration of their mental capacity or the existing property arrangements. If that proves true, it would be a serious ethical violation. A knock at the door interrupted them. James stood on the porch, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his surgeon's hands trembled slightly. James, we need to talk. Hannah. Led him to the kitchen, where Logan excused himself to make calls from the porch. James stared at the familiar room as if seeing it for the first time. His gaze lingered on the height marks etched into the doorframe, the collection of magnets from family vacations, the chipped mug their father had used every morning for 20 years. James. I spoke with the county recorder's office this morning, and our parents' bank, and the mortgage company. Hannah waited silently. James, why didn't you tell us how bad things had gotten? Hannah, I tried. For years. You and Rebecca were always too busy. When I mentioned financial concerns, you both said to just handle it. So I did. James sank into a chair. Using your own money? Hannah, what choice did I have? Let them lose their home? Stop their medical treatments? You and Rebecca made it clear you couldn't help financially. James rubbed his face. I always assumed Dad had everything under control. He was so proud, so insistent that he had provided for everyone. When the lawyer told us about the will after the funeral, I never questioned it. Hannah, did you question why I wasn't included? The silence that followed contained its own answer. James, the lawyer said you and Dad had disagreed about something, that you had been compensated in other ways. I assumed he meant by living here, rent-free. Hannah laughed without humor. Rent-free? I've paid every bill in this house for 7 years, James. I put my entire inheritance from Grandma into keeping this place standing. I gave up my career, my relationships, everything. James stared at the floor. I didn't know. Hannah, you didn't ask. The grandfather clock chimed in the hallway, marking the hour with the same steady rhythm it had maintained through generations of family joy and sorrow. James finally looked up. The lawyer called this morning. He admitted there were irregularities. With the will. Said we should settle this privately as a family to avoid complications. Hannah's eyes narrowed. What kind of irregularities? James hesitated. He said the will was updated when Dad was on heavy medication after his second heart surgery. And that you were originally included until the final version. The revelation struck Hannah like a physical blow. Not a deliberate exclusion then, but manipulation during a vulnerable time. James continued. Rebecca is at Wellington's office right now reviewing the drafts. She's threatening to report them to the Bar Association if they don't provide full disclosure. Hannah had never expected Rebecca to become an ally. The sister who had always been too busy, too important, too removed from family matters, was now using her legal expertise to demand answers. James leaned forward. Hannah, I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions. I should have been here helping instead of building my practice in Chicago while you handled everything alone. Hannah felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crack. The brother who had once taught her to ride a bike, who had defended her against bullies in elementary school, who had helped her move into her first apartment, was finally seeing her again. The front door opened, and Rebecca entered, followed by Logan. Her face was flushed with anger, her designer suit slightly askew. Rebecca. The will is invalid, not just because of the property transfer, but because Wellington knowingly took advantage of Dad's diminished capacity. I've seen the documentation. They had him sign the final version the day after major surgery when his medication dosage was at its highest. Logan nodded grimly. We suspected as much but couldn't prove it without inside access to their files. Rebecca set her briefcase on the table with uncharacteristic force. They're offering a settlement. A significant one, plus a formal admission of wrongdoing and my choice of which partners will be required to resign. Hannah blinked in surprise. You negotiated all that in one morning? A hint of pride crossed Rebecca's face. I can be very persuasive. When my family is being taken advantage of. Besides, I brought copies of your viral posts and mentioned the words class action lawsuit. They became remarkably cooperative. James looked between his sisters. So what happens now? Hannah gazed around. The kitchen where so many family moments had unfolded. The room where her mother had taught her to bake. Where her father had built science projects with her on the table. Where 3 generations of Matthew's family had gathered for holidays and celebrations and consolations. Hannah, now we decide what kind of family we want to be going forward. Chapter 6:3. Months later, Hannah stood on the porch watching the moving truck pull away. The late summer sun cast long shadows across the lawn where generations of Matthew's children had played. The ancient oak tree still spread protective branches over the house that had almost been lost. Rebecca emerged from the front door carrying the last of the boxes. That's everything from my apartment. The Seattle firm wasn't happy about my transfer request, but they eventually approved it. James appeared behind her. My fellowship at Massachusetts General starts next month. The surgical department is actually superior to Chicago's program. I should have applied here years ago. Hannah smiled at her siblings, wondering at the remarkable transformation the past months had brought. The settlement from Wellington and associates had been substantial enough to establish a family trust for the house, ensuring it would remain in Matthew's hands for generations to come. More importantly, it had provided the resources for all 3 siblings to reimagine their relationships with each other and with their ancestral home. Rebecca had surprised everyone by requesting a transfer to her firm's Boston office, allowing her to spend weekends in Salem. James had secured a prestigious surgical fellowship at Massachusetts General Hospital, returning him to the state where he had grown up. And Hannah had finally enrolled to complete her master's degree in historic preservation with a focus on New England architecture. The house that had once been Hannah's burden had become a shared responsibility. Each sibling now contributed financially to its upkeep. Each had a dedicated space that honored their individual needs. Each had a voice in decisions about its future. Hannah ran her fingers over the worn porch railing, remembering her father doing the same gesture countless times over the years. There's something I need to show you both. She led them to the study where the grandfather clock still marked the steady passage of time. From the desk drawer, she removed a small wooden box inlaid with mother of pearl. Hannah, I found this hidden in Dad's closet last week. There was a letter inside, addressed to all three of us. She opened the box and removed a yellowed envelope. Inside was a single page, covered in their father's distinctive handwriting. Hannah began to read aloud. "My dear children, if you are reading, then something has gone wrong with my plans. I always intended for this house to belong to all three of you equally. Hannah for her extraordinary sacrifice in caring for us. Rebecca for her fierce protection of family interests. James for his compassionate heart that always reminded us what mattered most. This home has sheltered Matthews for 7 generations. Its walls have witnessed births and deaths, beginnings and endings. It is not just a structure of wood and stone, but a repository of who we are and where we came from. Share it. Protect it. Let it be the place that always connects you, even when life pulls you in different directions. With eternal love, Dad." Silence filled the room as the full weight of their father's wishes settled around them. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, marking moments, becoming memories, becoming history. Rebecca wiped away a tear. When was this written? Hannah checked the date. 2 weeks before he died. After the manipulated will, but before he could correct it. James placed his hand over his sister's. He would be happy now, seeing us together like this, honoring his real wishes. Hannah nodded, looking around at the home that had nearly been taken from her. The home that had always been meant for all of them. The home that would now continue its legacy through a new chapter. Outside, a car pulled into the driveway. Logan Porter emerged carrying blueprints for the accessibility renovations they had planned for the first floor. Hannah watched through the window as he studied the porch with a contractor making notes on a tablet. Rebecca followed her gaze. He's been incredibly helpful through all of this. Hannah smiled. He understands what this house means, not just the structure, but the history it contains. The grandfather clock began to chime, marking the passage of another hour in a home that had witnessed 2 centuries of such moments. The 3 Matthews siblings stood together in a circle of reconciliation that their parents would have cherished above any material inheritance. The legacy they had nearly lost had been reclaimed not just through legal documents and financial settlements, but through the restoration of family bonds that had frayed but never fully broken. The house that had almost divided them had ultimately brought them back together. Hannah opened her notebook one last time. The detailed records that had saved her home were now joined by new entries: family dinner plans, holiday gatherings, renovation ideas. The meticulous documentation of disaster had transformed into the joyful recording of renewal. She closed the book and placed it in the desk drawer. Its work as evidence was complete. Its new purpose as family archive was just beginning. CTA and teaser. If you think this story ends here, wait until you see what happens when Hannah discovers the hidden room in the attic, containing secrets that will change everything the Matthews family thought they knew about their ancestors and the true origins of their Salem home.